Welcome to Workday Chats, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jen Johnson, and I am the Head of Retail and Hospitality Product Marketing here at Workday, and I will be hosting the conversation regarding what's top of mind today in retail. If you have any questions throughout today's discussion, please feel free to join the discussion through the chat, and we'll be happy to answer those through comments. I'd like to welcome our guests. We have Andrea France from Workday and Paul Reiner from Deloitte. Would you mind introducing yourselves?
Sure. I'm Andrea France. I'm the go-to-market lead and industry principal for Workday in retail and hospitality.
Hi, I'm Paul Reiner. I'm with Deloitte Consulting and leader of our retail strategy and M&A practice.
Great. All right, so let's start off the discussion today around the changing world in retail. As we all know, it's December, and retailers around the world have survived what we consider the Super Bowl of retail. Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Singles Day. So today we brought in a group of experts that are going to share some of their perspectives on what's going on in retail and some of the trends throughout the holiday season, but also just in retail in general. There's a couple of stats, Andrea, that I think you wanted to share in regards to some of the influence around the digital experience in retail.
So shopping has definitely changed, and there's such a digital influence now. Paul actually provided these stats. 75% of all purchases are digitally influenced. Whether they're purchased in a store or online, they're digitally influenced. And 25% are purchased in store only. So we're seeing a trend, a shift in how people are shopping, and digital is becoming top of mind for every retailer.
And speaking of trends, I thought we'd start off the conversation around some of the trends that are happening today in retail and what we see. Paul, I'd love to hear your perspective on that since you're front and center with retailers every single day.
Sure, happy to talk about it. And just to build on Andrea's comment, it's interesting, the merging of the channels is getting so dramatic that most retailers have stopped reporting now on separate online versus brick and mortar sales and comp sales. And even when you start even thinking about comp sales, is comp sales even the right metric to use given how much of it is online influence now as well?
Right.
So people are thinking more geographic based sales comps instead. The other thing to think about is these new business models that are coming in too. It used to be that most of retail purchases were purchasing of products. Services is becoming an increasing piece, and the way that people are even buying products is changing dramatically. Mm-hmm. For example, you think of subscriptions. We've seen a big rise in that. You see used products is also starting to rise, not only by used sites, but you're seeing the major players starting to do used as well. As well as you think of some of these other business models too, the sharing economy as well, and being able to share and rent clothes as well. Mm-hmm. So all of that is starting, and you're going to see it across every different subsector within retail too over the coming years. And if you think of these new business models, they're already starting to take about 10% of the market, and that could even grow more dramatically over time.
And the other thing that's happening is retailers are embracing these new business models, and they're turning into companies that are different than retail. So if you think about a large mass merchant who needs to ship product, you think about how their supply chain works. What's happening is they're buying services in order to deliver products, which is real different. So they've turned into a logistics company. So in effect, many of the retailers' business models are just changing so quickly. They're adding different aspects of business and becoming wholesalers or shipping companies or even service companies. So the model is changing very much in retail, and we're going to see more disruption and more change in the future.
The percentage of products that are being picked up or shipped from the store for e-commerce is changing, is significantly increasing.
Absolutely.
Where the store is being used as the depot for it.
Yes.
The other point that I want to think about, if we're looking way into the future now, and it's starting to become more and more of a reality, 3D printing now is over $15 billion. I think I saw a statistic the other day saying it was about $18 billion of 3D printing supposed to grow to over $35 billion in the next 5 years. So as that grows, question is how will that impact the supply chain for retailers too, as you can start to make the product more on site.
Right.
So
Right.
explain a little bit how that would impact retail from a 3D printing
Well, this is
perspective.
obviously in the future, but as it becomes more popular, think of 3D printing being able to be done in the store. So to start off with, probably the 3D printing will be more expensive. So individuals having a 3D machine is probably impractical in the start, but you could start by seeing them in more centralized locations. So all of a sudden, I'm no longer manufacturing overseas or at one location, but I can manufacture using my 3D printer. I can also customize it to your
Exactly,
needs and
exactly.
personalize it to what you want. So all of a sudden, I don't have a large inventory anymore. I'm making it as you need it for pickup and
That's
or delivery.
awesome.
Yeah, when I think about 3D printing, one of the things that I think about a lot is how I could walk into a store and actually ask them to print a pair of pants that would fit me without being tailored to my specifications, customization. So I think there's a lot of applicability in apparel and footwear to do this, and there's a lot of companies that have started doing that right now.
So thinking about these different business models and the need for customization and personalization and increasing the customer experience, do you have any insight into some business models that retailers may be thinking of or actually doing that are helping to kind of enhance that customer experience?
Well, when you think about where the world has moved to now with the transparency that I can know the price and the product availability at any retailer or store. So just having the product is not that advantageous now. It's
Right.
really having an experience that is differentiated on top of having the product at a fair price. And so how do you make that experience happen? So you've seen in stores the product information, the reviews, the recommendations, the ability to have a relationship with someone to curate the assortment for you and
Yes.
direct you to what you might need and help you, as well as having ancillary services on site to help you with whatever that might need, whether it be for clothing, the customization or tailoring, whether it be for technology, the service or setup. How do you have the complementary service and information to help make that customer experience from start to end
Yeah.
a success?
Even the delivery model for a company like furniture could change, where they don't have the logistics and you can actually hire people to do it yourselves through apps in order to have things delivered to you. So that is absolutely going to change as well. When we talk about a changing business model, one of the things that I think is really fascinating is stores without inventory. Then that is happening right now. And we have an example that just came up. I just read yesterday that Canada Goose opened a store and they only have the amount of inventory for people to try on. And they actually have an area in the store where they can bring it down to, 40 and 50 degrees below zero. So you can test the product and then come out of that room and say, this coat will keep me warm in this kind of weather and I'll buy this from you at that point. So talking about taking an idea and a customer experience and wrapping it into what happens in a store is really fascinating to me. And they've gone above and beyond what a customer experience in a store would be like.
And I think that's what you're going to see more and more
Yes.
of. How do you make the retail location be more of a showroom to show you the
Yes.
ancillary benefits that you couldn't see in your
Yes.
house? You've already seen magic mirrors and other things to be able to virtualize how something would look with you in different lights and different images.
Yeah.
You've seen the furniture applications of being able to show you how it would
Place
fit
in
in
your
your
room.
room.
Yeah.
You're going to see more and more of that over time.
Yeah, even think of exercise equipment now, where you're able to take classes during exercise. You don't have to join a gym anymore. Or there's now a magic mirror that has something where you can exercise in front of it, and they show you the exercises to do. So all of that in the consumer world is changing the way that we think about an experience for a customer.
Shoe stores have now, tracks or treadmills
Yeah.
to run
Right.
on to be
Yeah.
able to
To
experience
prep,
your shoes.
To test.
And I think that endless aisle piece around having limited inventory is going to be such a crucial part to kind of how retail changes in the future, more so than ever, especially since, the brick and mortar stores, as we know it, are changing. a lot of retailers don't have the space that they used to have. They
Right.
don't want to pay for that space.
Right.
So much of it is being driven by the digital world.
Mm-hmm.
So having the ability to go in and touch and feel and see those products, but not necessarily taking home the product
Right.
from that moment, I think is going to be part of the future.
What's accelerating that is when you think of the last mile delivery and how inexpensive that's becoming.
Right.
Yes.
Now, as we're starting to see drone delivery being tested and trying to see that being rolled out more, the cost of that last mile delivery will become less and less. So the motivation of a retailer to deliver it to you without much cost is going to continue to only increase.
Right.
Awesome. So talking about some of these changing expectations from a consumer perspective, can you give me some insight outside of new business models that retailers are thinking about? Some insight that what consumers are driving retailers to start doing and thinking about, and how that's changing and from a competitive perspective?
Well, let's talk speed for a moment, because it's been really fascinating to watch, really the speed, frankly, of the speed of delivery, right?
Right.
It wasn't that many years ago where we thought 2-day
Was
delivery with
amazing.
Prime
Right.
was like
Right.
amazing and
Yeah.
no one needed
Right.
it. Now it's a day, and now some of it's an
Hours.
hour,
Yeah.
literally 1
Yeah.
hour. And as I mentioned before, with the drone delivery or something else, it's going to be even quicker. And then if you get to over time with 3D printing, you can print it yourself. So I think that instantaneous satisfaction of what you need is going to be more and more apparent. And so whether you need to go into the retail store or have it delivered to you, you can get that now satisfaction
Right.
in multiple ways.
Right.
Do you have any other perspectives on what the consumers are doing to drive retailers to think differently outside of personalization and speed? I know we talked a little bit about the new business models. How about like data and insight, and what are the consumers demanding for retailers to kind of think differently about how they're using their data?
Well, I certainly think that employee engagement is really important to retailers, especially in the brick and mortar store, but even beyond the brick and mortar store, because you're interacting with a brand or a retailer in many, many different ways. And I think it's so important that employees are able to manage everything they need to do as far as their tasks are concerned in order to service the consumer in the store. I think that retailers are really starting to more or less pay attention to what's happening in the store, helping their employees to grow and to learn about products and how they can succeed.
So that's interesting. We talk a lot about, from a retail perspective, the customer experience and how
Right.
critical that is. But we all know in this day and age, none of that is capable without technology and without employees.
Right.
One of the biggest challenges, I think, in retail today is that battle for talent. There's many things driving that. Our unemployment rates are the lowest they've ever been. Minimum wage is the highest it's ever been. Potential employees have more options than they ever had in regards to how and when and where they can work. Tell me a little bit how you've seen retailers handle this battle for talent, and what type of technologies they're using to support that.
So one of the things that is changing in this world of retail is how employees are serviced. And if you think about, we can think about something like the Uberization of the employee, where employees want instant pay. They want to work and they want to get paid. They don't want to wait 5 days or 7 days or 10 days or 14 days to get their check. So that's really influencing how employees come to a business in order to work. There's a different mindset for employees. They have many more options, and they may not want to be tied to being in one place for 8 hours, because we're such a mobile society. So I think that one of the things that's really going to start changing is the idea of how we grab employees and how we help them to work for us with better pay. Instant pay, I'm sorry. I've seen many of the retailers start their recruiting for the holiday season. Seasonal businesses are ramping up for employees. And I've seen many employees start this ramp up, or many businesses start this ramp up as early as September or October, because the battle for talent is so great, and they just, have to increase the number of employees they have in the store in order to service the customers. So that's really a challenge for retailers now.
One trend that I would add to that is the fact that we're moving from the traditional advertising to much more of social media and influence via friends.
Yes.
So whether it be to attract employees to come work for you versus the traditional, put a sign outside or have an advertisement
In the
et cetera,
paper.
in paper or, online, to much more of how do I build a social connection for it? And how do I get
Yes.
friends and others to recommend
Absolutely.
it? How do I be seen as a place that people want to work at?
Exactly.
Whether it be that for the employees or frankly also for the customers and the other side. You're looking at the shift in the marketing budget significantly from your traditional media to much more of digital and social
Yeah.
because we're seeing the influence be so much more of I'd rather be influenced by my friend
Right.
than by an advertisement.
Right. And I think that social piece is impacting so much of how employees are making decisions on what jobs they're going to take.
Yes.
I think the other thing that's kind of interesting in this kind of realm is no longer do employees want to work for a single company, right? They're not out there looking to just get a job with X. They're looking to work when they want to work how they want to work, and work where they want to work.
Yeah.
And a lot of retailers are starting to hire not only for a single location, so you're not going to work at X store on X street, but here's a vicinity of multiple locations, and you're willing to pick up shifts, wherever those shifts may
Right.
be. So being more flexible and agile, I think, from a retailer perspective, is critical to hiring the right talent.
And we're moving much more to this gig economy where
Yes.
people have much more than one job to be able to make a living these days. Oftentimes
Right.
people have to have 2 or 3 jobs. So
Right.
having the ability to be able to know your schedule in advance and being able to coordinate schedules between multiple jobs is even more critical than ever before.
And actually, in the gig economy, you could work for one company and do 5 jobs.
Right.
And that's what's happening now. One company is training you to do maybe service, and they're training you to do installations, and they're training you to do a whole bunch of different things within the realm, whereas before you might have been just a frontline worker selling a product.
Right.
So this is how internally retail brick and mortar is changing as well.
So let's talk a little bit about the changing workforce. So we've talked a lot about the changing consumer. We've talked a lot about the changing expectations from a retailer. But how about that changing workforce? So you brought up the gig economy. I know from a retail perspective, contract workers and seasonality workers is becoming more of a thing. There's also the demand for more flexibility within their work. And then the government regulations. There's so many regulations around fair scheduling and the type of things that labor is demanding from retailers. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing there, Paul.
So we do have a little bit of a convergence of trends going on. You have more and more employers and to a certain extent workers wanting that flexibility. At the same time, you have government regulation coming in to protect the workers and saying, hey, wait, you really are an employee, or we need to put protections in
Right.
here to make so. But retailers need to be sensitive of both the regulations and also the workers' desires for that flexibility. And so finding that match is kind of critical
Right.
to do it.
And one of the things that we're seeing as a trend is the mobility of employees, but also being able to use mobile in order to communicate. Everyone has a phone, and everyone wants to communicate through that phone. And whether it's how you work or where you work, those are the trends that we're seeing. They're using their phone for everything.
And that was always such a challenge for retailers
Right.
because a typical employee doesn't have a work email address or, outside of the
Exactly.
bulletin boards with the Post-it notes.
Yeah.
It was really hard to communicate with your employees.
Right.
So that mobility factor is huge, not only from how employees want to get their schedule and check their paychecks and pick up shifts, but also from the fact of being able to communicate with other employees
Right.
for shift swaps
Right,
or even
exactly.
with their managers for
Right.
potential tasks, things like that.
Or also thinking about from the consumer expectation. The consumer, you walk into a store, you expect the employee to be able to serve you from their phone and be able to look up
Exactly.
inventory, to be able to check you
Yep.
out, to be able to get more product information. going now back to the cash register and looking it up is kind of old school, right?
Yeah.
Really old school.
And yeah, imagine how quickly you're going to lose that consumer if that's, the way you're still working.
Right.
Let's shift gears a little bit to some of these emerging technologies that are threatening retail as we know it. One thing I like to talk about, at least from a hospitality perspective, is the impact Airbnb and HomeAway and Uber Eats and those types of services that don't necessarily have locations or businesses, but are impacting the way retailers and restaurants and hospitality organizations are addressing the competition. Are you seeing any emerging technologies within the retail space? How do you feel going forward that these emerging technologies are going to continue to ensure that retailers are kind of staying agile and flexible?
Well, I mentioned before some of these trends about rentals. You look at the growth from Rent the Runway and others, the growth of that piece. You look at subscriptions. You look at marketplaces now of used articles is growing pretty dramatically, double-digit growth in all three of these areas that I'm talking about now. So there's taking significant share from your traditional product worlds. And so how your retailers need to change and adapt to those changing and new modes of purchasing.
Right. One thing I think was interesting is you had mentioned, Andrea, earlier this week that there was a hotel that started renting out formal wear.
Yes.
As part of a business model, right?
Yes, that was the W working with, I think it was Rent the Runway. And they're starting to, so literally what we're seeing is businesses having partnerships in order to benefit each other. And, this is once again going back to changing business models and how you need to grow your business. I think that's really fascinating. If you think about some of the department stores and the kiosks and things they have in there, you can think about Planet Fitness and Kohl's are in a partnership where they're working together. So that's happening at a rapid pace as well, and it's changing the dynamics. One of the things you talked about in technology was 3D printing. I'd like to talk a little bit about AI and robotics and how that's changing the way that retailers are thinking. They're really starting to think about automating some tasks that can free up the frontline workers. So a lot of things having to do with scheduling and onboarding and things that they need to do in order to service their stores so that the customers can be serviced are now turning into tasks that are done through AI and robotics. So I think that that's really an area for us to watch, and I think it's really fascinating what's going to be happening there.
You're seeing on inventory more and more sophistication of retailers using AI and other technologies to be able to figure out where to pull the product from and get it to you the fastest. Or you look at next product to buy and the algorithms to recommend those to you. So those are some technologies we already know about. And now you look at where things are going with the artificial intelligence, and you can start to see where they will be going and predicting ahead of time where what your need is going to be, having those products at that place, having the expert there for you to serve you.
Yeah, and that ties in a lot to with this predictive analytics. It has a lot to do with data and the enrichment of data and how much data retailers have. I've always said that retailers are data rich and insight poor, because it's very, very hard to manage all this data and to figure out what to do with it. We collect it, we gather it, but what do we do with it? And how do we affect what's happening in our stores? How do we affect the merchandise and all of the things that you need to do to be able to manage a retail business?
And do it in a compliant way that you're following the regulations, you have the right permissions. But once you have them doing a compliant way, there's so much you can do with it to really help the consumer curate their selection, give them exactly what they want when they want it.
So I think that's the interesting piece, is we've always thought about insights and data and how that can impact the retailer and how they can make better decisions on how their, what their choices are. But it's really about the consumer at the end of the day, right? And getting all that data and understanding, maybe I should put the product here rather than here, or maybe I should offer this product instead of that product. At the end of the day, it's all about the consumer, right? It's about their needs and wants.
And speaking of technology, you look at the leading retailers now, they're putting cameras and other technologies in the store to see who's interacting with which products and what aisles, what's their hang time in different areas, are they interacting with an associate or not, are they converting, are they buying something extra as well, so we can start to refine and optimize where I'm putting products, what information I'm having next to it, and how I am going to use it. Even some of the artificial intelligence and some of the displays can recognize who it is who's coming up to them. Is it a man, woman, or child is the
that's
starting point. It's
amazing.
getting to face recognition where I'm starting to know who it is. And then I can serve you up based on what your interest is. I can also look at where your eyeballs are focused and then serve you up information about that particular
And
product.
it's so funny because just what, 5-10 years ago, we were worried about foot traffic and
Right.
average cart size and conversion rates, right? Now we're just getting so sophisticated about what the consumer wants and needs and how we
Yes.
can offer that up to them better, because it's no longer about price and promotion, right? That's,
Exactly.
you can't compete on that anymore.
Right.
So let's wrap this up from an innovation perspective. We've talked a lot today about emerging technologies, about what we think the future is going to look like from a trends perspective. If you had to share one thing on the topic of innovation in retail, what would that be for our guests?
Go ahead, Andrew. You want to go first?
I think that one of the most major things is what we just talked about with analytics and predictive analytics. I think that that's really going to be a game changer in retail. I believe that the ability to understand ahead of time what your customer wants and be able to react to it is really going to make a difference. And the retailers who can do that are going to be winners. They're absolutely going to be winners.
I think speed and agility will be the biggest thing. When you think about the cycles of time to develop a product, produce a product, get it to consumer. You could look back a few years ago, it was a 1 to 2 year process. Now it's less than 3 months.
Right.
That will continue to get faster and faster and faster, and consumers are more and more going to expect that. And you're going to see, I think, much more of this just-in-time kind of manufacturing, where you started to see flash sales a little while ago. You're starting to see, the new incarnation of it now. I think you're going to see more and more of these cycles faster and faster, with the product innovation quicker, and as the supply chain gets less and less expensive to ship and produce. To me, that I think will be dramatically shift the
Awesome.
retail landscape.
Yeah, so as you can tell, just from our quick conversation today, the world of retail as we know it just continues to change and change and change. And just when you think you understand it, it goes ahead and changes again. I wanted to thank our panelists today for joining me and their perspectives and insight. And I wanted to thank all of you for tuning in. We do have NRF coming up, which is next month. And Workday will be there in a big way. So we'd love for you to stop by and see some of the innovations that we're doing, as well as talk to some of our customers and understand the value that they're getting from Workday solutions. And with that, I would wrap up and say we'll see you all at our next Workday chat.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.